He decided he won't, and now a jury will not hear from him. Is the jury allowed to draw any conclusions from that? Is it like taking the fifth?
Absolutely not. They will be instructed that a defendant has an absolute right to testify in his own trial and to decline to testify in his own trial. And any defendant who declines to testify, the jury may not consider it and may not draw any negative inferences against a defendant. That is the beauty of our Fifth Amendment privilege against self-incrimination. But really, the only thing that should surprise us, Steph, is that we still have the capacity to be surprised. Donald Trump said he would be testifying or at least interviewing with Bob Mueller, and he didn't. He said he would testify in both E. Jean Carroll trials. He testified in neither. Is it any surprise that he's been telling us all along he would testify in his own criminal trial in New York, and now he has told us all he won't be testifying? He couldn't withstand 10 seconds of cross-examination from those New York prosecutors. So whereas we have to embrace his right not to testify, it is pretty interesting that he can't even take the stand in his own defense, nor can he call any witnesses of consequence who can tell the jury that Donald Trump did nothing wrong. No exculpatory evidence, nothing exonerating. And indeed, the Bob Costello decision to call him, I think, was an enormous strategic blunder, because I think Bob Costello hurt the Trump defense more than he helped the Trump defense.
John, the American people will now have no sworn testimony from the first former president who is running for president charged with a crime. Can you even put that into context for us?
No.
In a word, no.
No, we're way far past where the buses run, as we say in the South. Look, I think one thing that has emerged from this is that the rule of law is being applied. Trump is sitting there. The gag order has been enforced, perhaps not as stringently as it would be for you or for me, but the mechanics of the constitutional order are going forward. And I think it's hard to say this, that we needed to send that message to the world, that American democracy was not totally broken. But I think that message is being sent.
Susan, the defense case took less than one single day. Does Donald Trump care more about the defense in the courtroom or the defense he gives outside the courtroom on the steps? I mean, did you actually hear anything significant from him?
Look, Donald Trump is always litigating in the court of public opinion. That is his primary venue. And of course, there's nothing illegal about lying to the public in the court of public opinion, as Donald Trump is so skillful at doing. And so, of course, it's not a surprise that he gaslights all of us and says he is terribly gagged and he's being deprived of his First Amendment rights and his rights to defend himself by the judge in the case, but then refuses to offer a substantive defense in the case. His litigation of this case, such as it is convincing people that even without knowing any specifics, it's hopelessly unfair, it's a kangaroo court. And that's a message that he's pounding over and over and over again, regardless of the facts in this particular case. And, I think to John's point, on the one hand, it's important to see the mechanisms of the law being applied to Donald Trump, a judge seeking to hold him accountable, a jury of perhaps not peers, but of regular citizens being called in. But, this is also a sideshow. Let's remember that the real cases involving Donald Trump are not, it appears, going to come into court and going to show the world that justice is being applied to Donald Trump when it comes to questions about seeking to overturn the 2020 election, when it comes to things like taking classified information that he wasn't allowed to have after he left the White House. Those questions will remain unresolved headed into the election. This is a case that's a very different and much narrower in nature.
Glenn, did the defense witnesses do anything to help Trump?
No, I think they affirmatively hurt Trump's cause. You know, when Costello was cross-examined by the prosecution with his own emails saying things like to Michael Cohen, you know, sleep well, you have friends in high places, and we need to keep Cohen on the same page. And then the one, Steph, that I think is priceless and is prosecutorial gold is the one you referred to in your lead-in, where Costello actually put in an email, Cohen continues to slow play us and the president. Is he totally nuts? What should I say to this a-hole? He is playing with the most powerful man on the planet. Steph, can I tell you, that's ordinarily not the way an attorney talks about his client or his potential client. What becomes clear from all of the cross-examination is that, you know, it looks like Bob Costello was trying to catch and capture or capture and kill the information that Michael Cohen could provide that would incriminate Donald Trump. This was a whole lot of ugliness. And I have to believe, you know, especially after Judge Merchan had to clear the courtroom because Bob Costello couldn't even comport himself as, you know, a respectful witness. He was showing, quote, contemptuous behavior. The jury is not going to miss all of the signs and signals from Bob Costello. And I can only believe that Donald Trump directed his defense attorneys to put Costello on the stand, because, as I say, it was an enormous strategic blunder.
John, there's two groups of people I want to ask you about. First is the jury. Yeah. Next week, this group of people, after a long, complex trial where they had to sit through long testimony with lots of conflict, they're going to have to make a historic decision. What kind of burden is on these 12 ordinary Americans?
It's enormous. And it's part of a tradition that stretches back to the 13th century. It's the common law. It's Magna Carta. It's that the defendants are given the right to be tried, and that juries render these verdicts. I'm glad I'm not there. But I think if you believe in the system for all of its imperfections, then the system moves on and unfolds.
I love that you always qualify that. If you believe in the system with all of its imperfections.
Well, it is, right? It's an imperfect system. But what, as Winston Churchill said, it's the worst of all forms of government except for all the others, right? How would you replace a trial by jury?
Well, what is your take on this other group of individuals, this Trump cheering squad, showing up almost in uniform, matching ties, performing for him? That almost feels un-American.
Well, it's a cult, right? The Republican Party is not a party at the moment. It's a cult. It really is. It's a personality-driven. And this is a once.
Did you ever think you, John Meacham, would be saying that about the Republican Party?
No.
Does that make you sad?
Of course it makes me sad. I have voted for Republicans for president. I've, look, I'm George H.W. Bush's biographer. I mean, talking about George H.W. Bush in this context is like talking about the Peloponnesian War. It's that far back, right? And so, no, but it is that. And you saw even when things kind of work, you sort of saw the tension, right? You saw Speaker Mike Johnson do the deal on Ukraine, educate himself, say he wanted to be on the right side of history. Everything you want from a public figure. And what does he do? He shows up in Manhattan to show his fealty. Now, he's facing voters. I understand the forces on that. I've never been on a ballot. I get it. But I get why. I get the reason he's doing it. I don't get the ultimate reason. What the party's doing right now is they are putting the short-term power incentives, short and middle-term power incentives, over the long-term good of the experiment they are sworn to protect. And that is a position that, look, I wouldn't want history to be judging me if I ended up having to pay fealty to Donald Trump.